Welcome to Press Play, Media Strategies from Scot Media Tulsa. This is the podcast where we're going to dive deep into the world of marketing, communications, and public relations. I'm your host, Jeremy Scott, and every week we'll explore the tips, tricks, and tactics you need to build stronger media relationships and craft pitches that truly resonate. Whether you're a seasoned PR professional or you're just starting out in the world of media relations, this podcast is designed to give you real-world examples and expert insight that you can apply to your own strategies. We'll be sharing stories from working members of the media, lessons learned from the top PR pros, and we'll talk about the biggest media relations mistakes so you can skip the trial and error and just get straight to what works. If you're ready to elevate your media game, create compelling story ideas, and make sure your pitches stand out from the crowd, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Press Play. Well, I'm really excited to be launching this podcast. Those of you who have kept up with me for a while know I had a podcast a few years ago. It was called Sunrise Brief. It was a daily morning news show that took a lot of work. I was doing 5 shows per week, recapping the top national and international headlines to help you get your day started. What I found was it was a lot of work. Doing a show 5 days a week really takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of editing time. And while I was working on a full-time job, it really became difficult. So this is a great way for me to get back into the podcasting world in a way that hopefully can be helpful. And I'm really excited about launching Press Play. It's kind of a play on words. Press play, of course, because that's what you have to hit to start the podcast, but also press as in media and kind of the playing the game to get your media pitches, your PR strategies picked up, noticed by the media. You know, it's a fine art, and you have to really navigate some tough waters to get through the millions of emails that journalists are receiving every day. So what I wanted to do with this podcast was spend some time elaborating a little bit more on some of the popular blogs that I've already written and have available on my website, scotmediatulsa.com. That's Scot with one T, scotmediatulsa.com. There's a whole blog section where I've been creating blogs on a variety of different media relations topics. And I wanted to start this show by focusing a little bit more on the blog that so far has gotten the most traction on social media and on my website. It's interesting to see what people will respond to. I've posted different blogs on best ways to get your media stories picked up. I've posted blogs on the top mistakes that media relations, communications, and PR people are making. I've posted some blogs on crisis communications, specifically what you should and shouldn't do if you're a small business and you start to see negative comments on social media. You know, it can be scary. How do you respond to that? The best ways to make sure that you don't make a situation worse by responding to negative comments in a way that's not strategic. But what stood out so far as the top blog on my website is a blog that I wrote about why journalists won't provide questions before an interview. So this is something, as a working journalist myself, this is something I get asked all the time from PR people, from communications folks on behalf of their clients. So say you have booked your client on the local news. What they're going to want to know is what questions journalists are going to ask them when they show up for an interview. It's a question I get asked all the time. My response is always the same, which is I can't give you those questions because number one, I don't know what I'm going to ask you. Journalists really want interviews to feel natural. And when we're locked into questions ahead of time, it takes away that authenticity. So that's one of the main points that I get to in this blog. But the first thing I talk about is maintaining editorial integrity and authenticity. So I kind of hit on that. Journalists work to create content that is authentic, spontaneous, and true to the moment. What that means is we can't be locked into questions. If a journalist is providing you questions in advance and your client is expecting them to only ask those questions, then they're going to give us rehearsed answers, which can undermine the authenticity of the interview. It's really crucial that we have spontaneity. It maintains the credibility and the integrity of the broadcast. Really, we just don't want to be locked in because what questions we would ask your client depends on what your client tells us in their answer. We need the freedom to be able to go somewhere else to follow up, to explore a topic in a new way. And we can't do that if we're locked into questions. The second point, it ensures fairness and objectivity. Journalists have a responsibility to their audiences to conduct fair and objective interviews. By not providing the questions beforehand, we can ensure that the interviewee's responses are genuine and unscripted. Kind of goes more along what I was just saying. We don't want our guests to sound rehearsed. You can go over the topics with your client. Your client can know what we're going to ask generally. And I tell some people, I've told clients before, I don't provide questions in advance, but I will provide the topics in advance. They'll know generally what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about X, Y, and Z, but what I ask about those things will depend, and your client should be briefed and prepared to answer any question related to those topics. If they're an expert, they should be able to do that, no problem. The reason that they're being used for an interview is because they are an expert in that subject matter, so that shouldn't be an issue at all. We also want flexibility in the interview process. So interviews can be dynamic. The direction of the conversation shifts based on the interviewee's responses. I kind of hit on that earlier. Providing questions in advance can limit the natural flow of the conversation, and it can restrict the journalist's ability to follow up on interesting topics. Those are some of the main reasons that you won't get the questions in advance, but I really want to hit on, journalists generally are not trying to hide anything. It's not because we're going to get you in a trap on the air or during a live interview. It's truly because we want to make this as authentic as possible. And it also helps your clients. So as a PR professional, it is important to manage your clients' expectations and help them understand why journalists are not providing questions in advance. They're hiring you to tell them how this works, and it's your job to give them blunt answers and say they're not going to give you these questions in advance no matter how many times you ask because X, Y, and Z. Some easy ways that you can help explain this, just educate them on the journalistic standards. Journalists are working to be authentic. They want to uphold their integrity. Emphasize to your clients that by not providing these questions in advance, it really helps maintain those journalistic standards. And it's also important for you as a PR or media pro to highlight the benefits of this to your client. Pivot this in a way that isn't, I'm not able to get these questions for you. It's that I'm now educating you on the reason why you don't need those questions. Point out, it leads to a more natural, unscripted interview. It can portray your client as more genuine and more credible. That's what they really want. That's what they're hiring you to do. This can positively impact public perception. In the end, this really helps your client. It's also important for them to understand the reasons so that they don't cancel an interview just because interview questions aren't provided. And again, I mentioned this before, but point out to your clients that they can still be well prepared for an interview without knowing the exact questions. And it's your job to help guide them and develop key messages and talking points based off of the topic of the interview, not the individual questions. So let's say your client understands all that. They get it. They say, okay, fine, I won't get the questions in advance. We know the topics in advance, but I still want to be prepared. I still feel like I'm not quite ready. So as the PR person, the media relations person, it's your job to help develop key messages with your clients. You can work with them to come up with key messaging that they want to communicate during their interview. Some examples would be if you are interviewing on a financial topic that maybe the general public doesn't understand, you might want to work with them on ways to not dumb it down, but just simplify the topics so that the general audience can get it. If a journalist asks a question that's maybe really broad, training your client so they know how to bring that message back in, really hone in on one of those key messages, it's really going to help make them feel prepared. Can't stress this enough. It's important to conduct mock interviews. So you should be interviewing your clients many times before they go before a camera. Ask a variety of potential questions. You've worked in public relations for a while. You should know generally what kind of questions journalists are going to ask. This is going to help your clients think on their feet, become more comfortable with the interview format, and kind of break up that fear that they don't know what they're going to say because they're going to practice it so many times they know exactly what they're going to say, regardless of what the question could be. This is when it could be important to hire a media relations person to come in for media training. I do that through Scot Media Tulsa. I've worked with many clients where we sit down and conduct mock interviews. As a working journalist, obviously I know what questions journalists are going to ask. That's something that I do a lot, and it's been extremely helpful for nonprofits, for small business owners, people who aren't comfortable or used to being in front of the camera. When they're finished with a session, they tell me how much better it is because they've gone through the process. I also record those, so that's a tip that I would give. Record it with your phone. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just for training, but it's important for your client to see how they respond to questions, to see if they're umming or ahhing or having awkward gaps, if they're getting sweaty because they're nervous, if their voice is shaking. It's important for them to see all that so they can identify it and then hopefully change it. Another thing you can do to help prepare your clients is to research the journalist who's going to do the interview and the outlet. So a television news station may cover a story in a completely different way than a print paper would. A magazine is going to do it totally different than a trade publication. So understanding the journalist's style and the outlet's audience is going to really help with the types of questions that they may be asked, and it can help you tailor your client's response. Focus on the core topics. So identify the main topics that are likely going to be covered in an interview. Again, if going back to that financial scenario, let's just say that your client who's a financial advisor is being interviewed after a stock market crash. You know they're going to ask, what does that mean? What does that mean for 401ks? What does that mean for retirement? Should people be worried? How likely is it that this could be a repeat of 2008? Those are general topics that a journalist is going to ask. And again, if your financial expert that you're offering up as an interview is truly an expert, then they're going to be ready for that. And again, I can't say this enough. Encourage authenticity. Remind your clients that authenticity is key. They've got to be themselves. They have to speak naturally. Don't rehearse this. I've had some people in the past show up and I can clearly tell that they have rehearsed that answer over and over and over again. They sound like a robot. You want to sound conversational. You want to sound unscripted. In my opinion, in my media relations training sessions, I don't script anything out. I don't let them script anything out. We can go over key topics, but we don't go over scripts because you don't want to sound scripted. You want to sound authentic. So those are just a few of the tips that I put on that blog on the reasons that journalists won't provide questions in advance. I was kind of surprised. I've had probably 20 blogs up so far. That was the one that really took off. I've gotten a couple responses from people in the PR world. I've had a couple comments from people who are working journalists. I've had a couple professors reach out and say that this was enlightening to know. I had one person say, I've been told my whole career as a PR person, no, when I ask for questions, but not once has anyone ever told me why. So they found it to be helpful. So I hope that you guys found that helpful as well. By understanding the reasons behind the journalist's reluctance to provide questions in advance, I think it's really going to help your clients feel confident and ready to nail their interview, to convey their messages effectively. The approach not only respects the journalistic practice, but it also ensures that your clients are seen as authentic and credible sources. So that's it for episode 1. I really want the podcast episodes to be short, less than 15 minutes. I know as PR people, as journalists, time is one thing we always wish we had more of, so I don't want to waste it. My weekly podcast is going to focus on all kinds of different tips and tricks, insights from media experts to really try to help you. Again, I encourage you to go to my blog. It's at scotmediatulsa.com/blog. Again, that's Scot with one T, scotmediatulsa.com/blog. Again, I have dozens of them right now on different topics that can really help you. Share them. Everything's free. I hate when someone goes, you get directed to a website and then you have to put in your information. You have to put in your email address. You have to put in your phone number. Immediately it's going to be a marketing ploy. Someone's going to try to reach out and follow up with you. I am not going to do that at all. This truly for me is an outlet to try to help others. And again, as a working journalist, the more that I can educate PR and media people about the best practices in working with journalists, I think it's going to make for a better experience for me and for my team. Hopefully it'll be a benefit for yours as well. Well, for Press Play, I'm your host, Jeremy Scott. I'm excited about this podcast. I really appreciate you listening, and I look forward to sharing more communications, media relations, and marketing strategies in the weeks to come.